Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again, and in this video we will continue with my City Streets kit in Dreams for PS4 by expanding my lap timer module into an entire race timer system. There's too much work involved to build this while you watch, so the system is currently available in the Dreamiverse as race timer system, and I will show you how to grab that, drop it into your scene, and use it. This is the version that I built in the scene to get it working, and just to show you there are no tricks up my sleeves, I'm going to delete this entire system of logic and start over with the version available to you. So let's open up the menu and search. This is my stuff, of course, so I don't need to go looking for it, but you'll be able to find that either through my profile or by searching for Race Timer System. I will position this real fast and then we will open it up and get started. The system is made up of 6 components. We will start with an opening sequence that counts down to the start of the race. That consists of 4 cameras and some graphics for the countdown. You can change that to anything you like as long as the top switch runs to disable controls on the thing you will ultimately control, and the bottom switch runs to the start time input of the race timer module. The thing I want to control is WiiiCHCRAFT's Dreams Taxi, so I will hook up the 2 disable controls output on our race timer system to the disable controls input on the controller sensor for the taxi. You can find that input under the Important Properties tab. The output on the timer system is on the side of the opened microchip, or the only tab if the microchip is closed. When you have them side by side, it is obvious what you must do. Wire the 2 disable controls tab to the disable controls tab. Once the countdown sequence is over and the player has control, the next thing you need to be able to determine is when laps are starting or ending, and we do that with a one-way pulsed lap trigger module. So what does that mean? It means there are lots of ways to cheat and mess up timers. The best way to ensure that doesn't happen is to make sure the player is headed in the proper direction, and that if they aren't, nothing happens to the timer system. That way time starts and stops only if you're running the race as you should. We accomplished that with 2 trigger zones next to each other in order of proper direction and some logic. If the player is going the correct direction, they will be in the second zone when they exit the first zone. If they are going in the wrong direction, they will not be in the second zone when they exit the first. Here I have the first zone highlighted, and I am moving that zone into place at the start-finish line, which will be the demarcation point for our laps. You want to place that so there is no possible way around it, and so that there is also room to travel through the second zone in a linear direction without accidentally triggering it before the first zone. It's important to be able to see both zones while you're setting them up, so you want to leave the first zone highlighted and then open the menu for the second zone. The second zone is then placed behind the first one in desired direction of travel. The way the timer is set up, time is recorded when the second zone is entered. You want to position the second zone so the zones meet at the precise place you want to restart the time or record laps. I leave a tiny gap between the 2 just to be safe. I would avoid overlapping them to stay away from any possible undesired behavior that may cause. Having them right next to each other is probably fine. One last thing of note is that you want to make sure all of your trigger zones are set to detect the proper thing. By default, these are set to detect possessable player controls, but you may want to use them differently, like for AI-controlled competitors. Next, we want to set up our checkpoints. If you open the microchip for each checkpoint, you will find a one-way trigger zone microchip, just like the one we are using to track laps. The checkpoints have some extra logic to determine best checkpoint times throughout the race, but setup is exactly the same as the lap trigger. Once you determine where you want your checkpoint to be, place your 2 trigger zones across the roadway in the proper order. It's possible that you may need to resize the zone for your particular purposes, but the main concern with the roadway is that there be no way around the zone. Also, like in this instance, you want to make sure your zone does not bleed over into other areas where your player can go. That way you avoid false positives. Like the lap timer, place the second zone behind the first in the desired direction of travel. And you will repeat this process with each of your checkpoints. It's important to note that these checkpoint modules work by using two variables that are specific to the checkpoint they control. I'll expand on that more when we add new checkpoints a little later in the video. Now let's test this out and see if everything went okay. And it did not, because I forgot to set the cameras in the countdown to start sequence, so let's go back in there and do that real quick. Alright, let's try that again. So the countdown sequence is working properly this time, and we are underway. The only issue on this run is that the third checkpoint doesn't trip, and this is a good mistake to encounter in this video because it's an easy one to make. So let's look at the third checkpoint microchip and see what's going on. All of our variables are properly named, so that is not an issue. Let's look at the trigger zones. I have the menu open for the second zone here, and if we close that, the first zone becomes invisible. So I placed those backwards. Also good to show that because it didn't trigger going into it backwards, which is how it's supposed to behave. And that's a very easy solution. Just move the second zone behind the first, like it should be. Back in play mode and near the end of the third lap here to show that the problem has been resolved. Everything is working great. You can see the race timer running in the upper right hand corner, and below that the times for the first 3 laps, and the race timer stops when the third lap is completed. But that is not all there is to this system, because you can very easily change the amount of checkpoints and laps, so let me show you how. We're going to add a 4th lap. The lap timer modules on the right contain everything you need to time a lap, so all you have to do is clone one and drag it down. Each lap needs a unique variable for storing the lap time, so we need to create one for the new lap. There are 2 places you need to make this change: in the variable and in the variable modifier. You can name these anything you want, but the name needs to be different from all the other variables you're using. By default, the lap timers use the variable name convention of lap and a number, the checkpoint modules use check and a number and best and a number, and the race timer module uses final. When adding a lap, the other thing you need to do is adjust the number displayer for the lap timer so that it doesn't overlap the previous lap time. It's easiest to do this with the number displayer for the previous lap's time highlighted so you can see where you shouldn't put the new one. That's the setup. Now we need to hook up the new module. The entire setup is run through a selector operating as a state machine. A is the pre-race state. Each state after A is dedicated to a lap, and then the last state is the end of the race. The default setup is that the end of the race state runs to the tabs for recording and displaying the time for the third lap in the third lap module. It also runs to the tabs on the race timer to record and display time because the third lap is the last lap. We want to make the 4th lap the last lap. The first thing we do is go into the selector and add another state to make room for the 4th lap. The 4th lap is now the last lap, so we want the end of race state to cause the time of the 4th lap to be recorded and displayed. Also, the end of race state is now F instead of E, so we need to run wires from F to the record time and display time tabs of the race timer module. When that's done, we can delete the connections between the selector's E tab and the race timer module. E on the selector is now the 4th lap state, so we want to hook E up to the start timer tab on the 4th lap timer module. And believe it or not, that's all you have to do. Here we are back in play mode. You can see on the right that 3 laps have been completed, and we will finish up the 4th lap to end the race. Now back into edit mode with the 4th lap removed, and let's look into adding a 4th checkpoint. Checkpoints are not controlled by a selector, they are very simply chained, and the chain is restarted by the lap timer. So all we need to do is clone a checkpoint module and hook it up. You can do this anywhere in the chain, but the easiest way is to add one on the end. The first thing we'll do is rename the microchip so there's no confusion about which module is which. Not sure if I did that on the 4th lap timer module, but it's a good idea there too. There are 6 variable gadgets in this module that need their names changed to operate correctly and avoid unwanted conflicts. Since we cloned the 3rd checkpoint module and this is the 4th checkpoint, I will change all the 3s to 4s in these variable gadgets. Super easy to hook these up. Run a wire from the Start Next Checkpoint tab of the previous checkpoint module to the Start Reset Time tab on the new module. From there, you'll need to rearrange the trigger zones for your existing checkpoint modules and then place the trigger zones for the new checkpoint module. And let's check it out in play mode again. Here's the first checkpoint. Second checkpoint. Third. The new checkpoint number 4 and the lap triggers as expected, so that's working great. So in this video I showed you the first iteration of my new race timer system, how to drop it into any scene, use it, and change it based on your needs. Lots more great stuff and plenty more videos to come, so stay tuned. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you in the Dreamiverse.